Something extraordinary is unfolding, and it deserves to be described plainly. The United States is at war, bombs are falling, American soldiers are dying, the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which roughly 20% of the world's daily oil supply passes, has been functionally closed. Oil prices have surged past $100 a barrel. Ships sit anchored outside the strait, unable to move. This is the largest oil supply disruption in the history of global energy markets. And yet the Commander-in-Chief of the United States has been posting videos of Grand Theft Auto on social media and presenting them as footage from the war. That is not a metaphor. That is a documented, verifiable fact. What follows is an attempt to describe what is actually happening, not the performance of it, but the reality. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a massive, coordinated surprise airstrike campaign against Iran. The strikes were simultaneous, targeting multiple cities and multiple sites. According to ABC News, confirmed by Iranian state television, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed in the first hours of the campaign. The man who had ruled Iran since 1989 was gone in a single night. President Trump declared it a historic victory. Then the response came. Iran launched ballistic missiles and drone strikes against Israel, against American military bases across the region, and against Gulf Arab neighbors. The IRG's Khatam al-Anbiya headquarters announced that any vessel linked to the United States, Israel, or their allies would be considered a legitimate target. Senior IRG advisor Ibrahim Jabari warned on Telegram that the strait was closed and that oil prices would reach $200 in the coming days. The markets believed it. Brent crude shot past $119 a barrel. The International Energy Agency convened an emergency meeting of all 32 member nations and agreed to release 400 million barrels from strategic reserves just to stabilize prices. Even then, oil stayed above $100. The consulting firm Rapidin Energy called it the largest supply disruption in the history of global oil markets. The IEA agreed. While all of this was unfolding, President Trump posted photos of comedian Bill Maher not once, but 8 times in a single day. He then switched to posting Grand Theft Auto videos, actual in-game footage from a video game, presenting them as images from the war in Iran. He followed those with Call of Duty clips. He began mixing Major League Baseball highlights and NFL football footage with images of military operations. This happened while commanding an active war that had killed over 130 people in Iran, over 800 in Lebanon, and 12 in Israel. It happened while 6 American service members came home in caskets, killed when a KC-135 refueling aircraft crashed in Iraq. When Trump held his first official press conference since the war began, he filled the room with sports coaches and athletes, Inter Miami soccer players, Alex Rodriguez, NCAA basketball coaches, NCAA football coaches. He did not want to discuss the war. He wanted to discuss whether college athletes should be paid for their name, image, and likeness. He ended what was nominally a wartime briefing with a single word, directed at one of the coaches standing beside him. "Coach," Trump told the press conference, "their army is gone, their navy is gone, their communications are gone, their leaders are gone, their air force is wiped out entirely. They have 32 ships. All 32 are at the bottom of the ocean." He presented the war as essentially concluded. The evidence tells a different story. Iran's Foreign Minister Araghchi appeared on NBC News. Iran's Supreme National Security Council Secretary Ali Larijani addressed the world on television, stating, "The Iranian people do not fear your hollow threats." The IRG issued daily operational statements. Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, son of the man the United States had killed, declared that the Strait of Hormuz must remain closed as a tool to pressure the enemy. By every measurable indicator, the Islamic Republic was still standing, still functioning, and still retaliating privily. According to NBC News, Trump had been telling aides and Republican officials that he wanted to send ground troops into Iran. He had not said this publicly, nor informed Congress. He was whispering it in private. Then, on a flight back from a ceremony to receive the bodies of 6 fallen service members, he openly raised the possibility to reporters aboard Air Force One. The military movements on the ground told their own story. Roughly 5,000 additional Marines and sailors were being deployed to the Middle East. The 82nd Airborne Division canceled a planned training operation. The aircraft carrier USS George Hugh Bush sailed from Norfolk toward the war zone, a third carrier group entering the region. Axios separately confirmed that the United States and Israel had discussed sending special forces into Iran to secure nuclear material. lost 500,000 people sits directly on the strait. The IEA estimated that the war was cutting global oil supply by roughly 8 million barrels per day in March, the result of the near closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which normally carries up to 20 million barrels per day. Brent crude, which had been hovering around $70 before the war, had spiked above $119 within days. Rystad Energy's vice president for oil markets warned clients that prices could reach $135 per barrel if the disruption lasted for months. The ERG said to expect 200. Saudi Aramco's CEO Amin Nasser called the situation in the Strait of Hormuz a threat with catastrophic consequences for the world's oil markets. China, which receives a third of its oil through the strait, faced existential economic pressure. Russia, which a Fox News correspondent reported was already aiding Iranian targeting operations, a report Trump dismissed at a press conference as a stupid question, had potential reasons to deepen its involvement. A regional war was beginning to cast a much larger shadow. There is a specific historical parallel to what we are watching, and it is not Vietnam, not Iraq, not Afghanistan, though those histories are present too. The parallel is February and March of 2020. In those months, a virus was spreading. The early data was available. The warnings were coming from the scientific community, and Trump was saying publicly, on camera, on record, a lot of people think that goes away in April with the heat. We have 12 cases, 11 cases, and many of them are in good shape. He said the country would be open by Easter. He said the curve would bend. He said it was fine. By the time the full weight of what was actually happening could no longer be denied, hundreds of thousands of Americans were dead. The pattern is identical. Catastrophic reality on one side, happy talk, sports metaphors, and victory declarations on the other. Their army is gone. Their navy is gone. We've won. But the ERG is launching drone strikes daily. The new supreme leader is giving speeches. The strait is still closed. Former Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was fired after confirming under Senate oath that Trump had personally approved a $220 million taxpayer-funded advertising campaign featuring her in cowgirl outfits, and that he had wanted the first ad to thank him personally for closing the border. After her firing, sources close to her began suggesting more broadly that the man making decisions about a war in Iran was not operating at full cognitive capacity. Multiple people who had been around Trump recently went to the press with versions of the same observation, pointing to the GTA posts, the sports coaches. The word coach used to close a military briefing as a pattern rather than isolated incidents. Trump himself had been saying something that kept appearing across multiple public speeches in front of tens of thousands of people. I don't think I'm going to make it to heaven. I'm doing a great job for a lot of people, but I don't think so. I'm just not worthy of heaven. He said versions of this at multiple events. He brought a group of far-right religious figures to the White House to pray for him. These are the words and actions of a sitting president commanding an active war. Two possible paths. One path leads to a diplomatic off-ramp. Iran has signaled through back-channel communications and through the continued visibility of its officials on international media that it is not entirely opposed to negotiations. If a ceasefire framework can be built, perhaps through Qatar, which has previously mediated between Washington and Tehran, and if the Strait of Hormuz can be reopened under some form of international naval escort, then markets could stabilize, oil could come back down, and the worst could be avoided. This path requires something close to a diplomatic miracle, but it is not impossible. The other path is a spiral. Ground troops get deployed, the Marines and the 82nd Airborne, already being moved into position, go in. The ERG, which has spent decades preparing for exactly this scenario, responds with asymmetric warfare along the Iranian coastline. The strait remains closed or is reopened only partially while guerrilla conflict grinds on. Oil reaches $135, then $150. Global recession follows. China, under existential economic pressure, makes decisions accordingly. Russia deepens its involvement. A regional war becomes something with a much larger shadow. White House officials said they expected oil prices to come back down once the war is complete. No one in the administration has defined what complete looks like. Trump himself gave conflicting signals in the same day. I think the war is very complete, pretty much, he told CBS News by phone. Then, at a separate event with Republican lawmakers, we've already won in many ways, but we haven't won enough. We go forward more determined than ever. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard, for its part, stated plainly that Iran, not the United States, would determine when the war ends. Three questions worth sitting with first. Is the public picture of this war that Iran has been defeated, that victory is close, that things are going well consistent with the evidence? 6 American soldiers are dead. Ground troops are being pre-positioned. The strait is still effectively closed. The new supreme leader is publicly defiant. The largest oil supply disruption in history is ongoing. Second is the behavior we have described: the Grand Theft Auto posts, the sports coaches at wartime briefings, the word coach used to close a military status update, the repeated statements about not reaching heaven, the 8 Bill Maher posts, in a single day during active combat. The behavior of a man who is fully in command of the situation? That is not a diagnosis. It is a question about a pattern, the kind of question that would be asked of any leader in any country. Third, when this ends, however, and whenever it ends, who will have been strengthened and who will have been weakened? Not the leaders, the people, the Americans paying higher fuel prices for the foreseeable future, the Iranians burying their dead, the Lebanese civilians displaced by the hundreds of thousands, the Gulf workers whose infrastructure has been caught in the crossfire, the young Americans whose draft status has suddenly become the subject of non-hypothetical public discussion. A question. The White House press secretary declined to rule out when asked directly. These are the questions underneath all the other questions. They deserve honest answers, and they are not getting them.